Hi, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. In this episode of Recognizing God's Omnipotence, I want to speak about evolution and what I call data stores. This all goes into showing that what we attribute to nature and the current accepted random evolution, that dogma that we just accept now is all incorrect. Because, like I said, I want to go through what I call these data stores, with my computer background kind of stuff, right? Through inspiration, what I see is we have basically throughout all fauna and flora, all plants and animals, we basically have, well, especially with the animals, right? Because plants, they're stationary, and besides hibernating, there isn't a whole lot else that we can go into to demonstrate. Like, there are two other data stores that I see. One of them that's very prominent, one of these data stores is responsible for basically the way we look, the form that we take. That's DNA, RNA. So we are very much aware, and with the Human Genome Project and all these things, we're trying to map that. We're trying to really understand one of the key databases that makes up who we are, so we can tell all our genes and what, how things control or dictate, our look and feel and the interactions and all that stuff. But I've been inspired that is just one form of data that's available. There are two others. And so we have the DNA, which is responsible for the way we look, our physical characteristics. But there are two others. One of them, I call it ability, and the other is knowledge. And let me kind of walk through this, right? As we look at, especially in what we consider the simple or the lower animals, what we see is, besides DNA, somewhere there is a store of knowledge. There is a store of knowledge. Now with us, knowledge is acquired through, fortunately, our written tradition. A baby is born, really doesn't, like we see in some of the higher animals, even imprinting. Your parents are whoever raised you. If you were, like we have occasionally, given to someone else from the hospital, whoever you're raised with, you imprint. That's your parents. We see this with even some of the animals. I saw, this thing of a wildebeest actually going up to a lion because it's lost its parents. It just walked up to, imprinting, and they said it will imprint on anything. So these are higher animals. So that knowledge is not there. It has to be taught in the higher animals. But as I did with the archerfish and the corolla spider, and again, there are millions of more, and I'll be going into more of those things, and I'll emphasize this part. The knowledge, like in the case of the, the corolla spider, the knowledge of identifying quartz crystals, which it uses as part of its trap to capture the food it needs, the knowledge to identify quartz crystal, that information, besides DNA, is passed to it. And it sounds, kind of like, well, yeah, knowledge is, but remember, there is no passing on by observing. Spiders basically, once they hatch out of their little egg thing, oftentimes have to run for their life. They are not staying around the large spiders, they become food. So knowledge of how to find or identify quartz crystal is not passed along by observing. So there's observation, there's also vocal, right? We can pass along things, vocal traditions. We don't have that in spiders. They don't have any written either. So that knowledge of identifying and using tools, the knowledge is passed along somewhere. And I know this sounds kind of way out there, Star Trek, but think about it. Up until fairly recently, we knew there was something governing that appearance that a child had to their parents. Trees had, so we knew there was something there, but we didn't know what. We didn't know that all the physical characteristics were encoded somewhere, but we can see that. We can see, yeah, there is a resemblance. There are characteristics being passed down from parent to child and on and on. We even understood that, well, now with genes, recessive genes, and they can recombine, and you see people with different characteristics. Well, yeah, the great-grandparents or the grandparents, but we kind of understood that even before we recognize DNA and recognizing, oh, there are genes that pass down with these attributes. Similarly, we can observe that spider, that archerfish, so many, especially of the lower animals, the more simple animals, a lot of that information, that knowledge is passed down. And for some reason, as we go higher up, the more complex, we don't see that. Now, if you think about evolution as this process of building, and it's kind of random, and it's just, that knowledge should continue. So we should be a lot more of that knowledge should be passed along, and we should see it somewhere. That these animals naturally have that knowledge, not just the physical characteristics, but the actual knowledge, like the spider that knows, I will use quartz crystals. I can identify quartz crystals and take them and arrange them around its little trap, the little hole that it sits in. That knowledge is passed along to it. And I always like to, go back to the idea that we use cell phones now, and I can have a conversation to someone anywhere in the world. I can have a video call, and 50 years ago, they would ask you, what are you smoking, man? Give me some of that good stuff. Because if you think you can just make a call to somebody, just with a little box and see them and talk with them, that was 50 years ago. Less than a century ago, you were way out there. But we observe these things, like the fact that DNA was passing along physical attributes. We can observe that for millennia. From the beginning of time, as we know ourselves, we can recognize, oh yeah, that's the son of, that's the daughter of. She has attributes like her parents. This tree, the seed, the tree grows just like the parent tree. We can recognize that, but we didn't understand the mechanism that fostered that enabled that. But now, when we look at things closely, we can see there is a certain amount of knowledge that's passed along, and it's only in the lower animals. More of it is passed in the lower. As we go higher up, it's lost. That's kind of counter this whole concept of random evolution, it's just nature. When we look at patterns, we see that. The other thing is ability. And they're two separate things. Because we can know how to drive a car. But the ability to do that without training, without practice, it does not happen, right? We watch sports. We can watch one of these sports stars kick a ball, make a three-pointer in basketball. They can do archery, they can do all these things. The ability to do that. So we have the knowledge, you have to understand how to use, like the lower animals can. The knowledge is also passed along. Ability. In us, we train and we train. Again, we are fortunate. We understand this thing. It's written. We can go and train and increase our ability. But ability is not passed along naturally, so to speak. There is no way that we can take one person with a certain amount of knowledge and transfer that to someone else. We just can't do it. But if we can access that database, it's kind of like if we can access memories. We all know we remember things, and we know that memory is stored somewhere. If we can access that, there is no need for a lie detector. We can literally have someone, plug a few things to you, and they can play back what you saw, what you did, your memory. They can play it back if we had access to that. Similarly, with these, when it comes to, the ability to perform some task, we don't see a gecko or the archerfish or the corolla spider, the portia spider, so many of these lower creatures, that ability is also passed along to them. So they don't have to practice and miss and miss. No, a spider can spin a web. As soon as the spider comes out from a very small spider, it can spin a web. It knows how to travel on that web. So the ability to do that. The archerfish, right? It does not practice miss. No, that ability. So ability takes a lot more. Knowledge is one thing. Ability means literally. Let's take the human example. If you wanted to transfer ability to, let's say something, shoot a basketball, that involves all the muscles, the brain, all the nerves, all of these things have to be retrained. So I think, with God all things are possible, but with us, I don't see that happening. That you can, it's literally like having an army. You train one soldier really well, and then take that ability, and if you know the knowledge as well, transfer it to others. I don't think we're getting there. With God, all things are possible. Because we see it with the lower animals. The archerfish, the ability to aim, to see, even with parallax, the difference between what you see in water and on land, to make that adjustment, to aim, and to fire off at that fly, that butterfly, that spider, and hit it up to 2 meters away. That ability is passed along, because from the very beginning it can do it. It's in there. So the knowledge is passed along. The ability, isn't that amazing? So everything, like we think about, the nervous system, the musculus, everything that is involved to enable that ability is also passed along. Again, just like a spider, a chameleon, changing colors. They don't have to think. We don't see they have to stop and think and look around. No, that ability is passed. The knowledge is also passed. Like I said, with the spider, it knows how to find quartz crystal. It knows how to arrange it. It knows how to attach the web to it. And a lot of knowledge is, if we look through many species, like I said, there are probably literally millions of examples where we see not just DNA that we are aware of today, and not too long ago we did not know of DNA, but we also can observe in the lower animals, especially knowledge. is somehow it's somehow packaged and passed along with the DNA. And everything that goes into the ability to perform some task for their survival, for attaining, that daily meal, or as often as they need to survive, that everything that's packaged in the ability is also passed along. With us, we don't have that. Like I said, as you go up higher. So that sort of counterintuitive process indicates to us that it's in line with God's caring, says, even for the smallest. He gave them. If we look into plankton and fishes, and we look at the birds, and we will see that everywhere as we go lower down, more of the knowledge and the ability to perform certain tasks without observing or learning from any others. Butterflies don't have to observe, they know. Caterpillars don't have to observe or listen to anything. Caterpillars, they know. So the knowledge is passed along, not just DNA. That knowledge is passed along, as well as the ability. So everything else, ability is a little more complex, because you think about, well, it has to have certain nerves, it has to have certain things firing, it has to have sight, but all of that is packaged and passed along. So we have to recognize, and especially in the lower, what we consider the more simple creatures, more of this knowledge and ability is passed along. As we go higher, it's sort of moved away from. Less of it is passed along, because we have the ability to acquire that from nurturing, which is, again, because I believe, and I'm inspired to say that a big part of us learning nurturing is because that's something that we are supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be good stewards. And so we learn that, and so we can pass it on, not just to others like ourselves, but be stewards of all of his creations. And so this is a great example of how it's counterintuitive, that whole thing of the random evolution. We see in evolution, the simple gets what they need. And they actually get more than the higher ones get, because the so-called higher and more complex creatures, certain things are gone, because they can acquire that from the community, whether it's the herd, the pack, whatever. They can acquire that. But the simple ones, the ones who operate independently, we see God's caring, we see God's nurturing, we see him passing along not just the DNA that basically describes what they are, what they look like, but we see knowledge being imparted. A great amount of knowledge that enables their survival and thriving is passed along, as well as everything that goes into the ability to perform tasks. Look around. We recognize he cares for even the simplest in this ecosystem. We need to also recognize there is purpose and perfection in his design. So as we go along, take a look around, recognize his omnipotence, and we need to keep on challenging this notion of, actually, I now say that nature is the manifestation of God's omnipotence. So when I say nature, I'm really referring to the manifestation. Everything we attribute to nature is a manifestation of God's omnipotence. And we see it in this passing of knowledge and ability in the simplest things. A caterpillar, a butterfly. We see it, and as we go up the scale and we think of ourselves as more complex, those things are somehow taken away, because we have the ability to learn, and we have the ability to pass things on verbally or part of the community that we're in. So I think it's very important we recognize this and recognize that not only does that apply to millions of years ago, it applies to us today. That we recognize that, very importantly, we all exist in the presence of the living, omnipresent, omnipotent God. And all around us are His handiwork. I want to remind you that you did not accidentally encounter this video. There's a purpose to all of this, and there are decisions that you made in the past that led you down this way. I'd like to invite you to pick up a copy of Humanity's Inflection Point, because this is when we become so much better. We realize synergies and release synergies that we at this point cannot even comprehend. And a lot of that becomes with recognizing, acknowledging the living, omnipresent, omnipotent God. A lot of that I have put into my third book, Humanity's Inflection Point, so you can pick up a copy. And I want to thank you for taking the time, and until we meet again, I wanted to thank you and ask that we all continue to receive God's blessing. Thanks again.